Money. We use it pretty much every single day, right? But how often do we really stop and ask the most basic questions about it? What is it? Who actually owns it? And who gets to decide what it's worth? Well, today we're going to dive into a treatise that's about 700 years old, and it answers these questions with a clarity that is, honestly, astonishing. This is the story of a medieval thinker who explained money for his time, and you might find for our time, too.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in 14th century France, and to put it mildly, it's a chaotic time. You've got the 100 Years' War raging, the Black Death has just torn through the continent, the whole economy is in a total mess. And right at the heart of all this chaos is a really sinister power held by the king, a power that let him throw the entire kingdom into turmoil just for his own personal gain.
I want you to think about this for a second. What if the leader of your country could find a way to just systematically take a little piece of every dollar you have, but without ever physically touching your wallet or getting anywhere near your bank account? It sounds like a pretty modern fear, doesn't it? Well, back in the 14th century, this wasn't some hypothetical scenario. It was a terrifying reality.
The technique they used was called coin debasement. Here's how it worked. A prince, who was always desperate for cash to fund his wars, would demand that all the coins in the kingdom be collected. Then he'd have them melted down, and he'd mix the precious gold or silver with a much cheaper metal like copper. Then they'd remint them. Suddenly, he has way more coins than he started with, and he gets to pocket all that leftover gold and silver for himself. It was basically a hidden tax, the medieval version of out-of-control inflation, all done by royal decree.
And the result of this little scheme? Absolute, total confusion. As this quote from the time puts it, nobody had any idea what their money was actually worth. Just try to imagine going to the market. Is that coin in your pocket pure silver, or is it mostly cheap copper? How can you run a business? How can you plan for the future, or even just save, if the very thing you use for trade is built on a lie? This was the world that one man decided he had to challenge.
So all these kings were treating the nation's currency like it was their own personal piggy bank. One of the greatest minds of that era saw it for what it was, a direct attack on society itself. His name was Nicole Oresme, and he was about to write the definitive rulebook on money.
Now, Oresme wasn't some outsider shouting from the sidelines. I mean, look at his life. He was a pillar of the French establishment, a top scholar at the University of Paris, the intellectual heart of Europe. He was also a theologian, a scientist, and this career path eventually led him to become a trusted advisor to King Charles V himself. So he had this really unique perspective. He was deep inside the system, but he had this fiercely independent mind. And that gave him the insight and the courage, around 1355, to write this short, incredibly powerful work that would echo for centuries, De Moneta, or On Money.
And this wasn't some abstract academic exercise, no way. As our source material makes very clear, his work was a direct, pointed response to the chaos and trade that the French kings were causing. He saw the damage with his own two eyes and decided to use his intellect as a weapon against it.
So to really make his case, Oresme had to start from the very beginning. He had to tackle the most fundamental question of all. What actually is money, and who is it really for? And his answers? Well, they were nothing short of revolutionary.
Oresme's definition is just brilliant in its simplicity. For him, money is just a tool. Think of it like a technology, one that was invented by the community to make trading things easier. And that official stamp from the prince? That's not a mark of ownership. Not at all. It's just a guarantee, a public promise that the coin has a very specific weight and purity of metal. The only reason for that stamp is to create trust.
And this right here, this brings us to Oresme's most central, most radical idea. Money belongs to the people. It's the property of the community that uses it. See, when a farmer trades his wheat for a coin, that coin becomes his property, just like the wheat was his property. The prince, he's just a custodian, a public servant who's been entrusted with keeping this public utility honest.
And if you accept that first idea, well, the conclusion is just inescapable. If a prince debases the currency for his own profit, he is literally stealing from his own people. He's breaking a sacred trust. And for a guy who would one day advise the king, Oresme does not mince words. He calls it what it is, an act of tyranny. It's a moral crime, not just bad economic policy.
So what is the prince's actual job then? Well, according to Oresme, it's incredibly limited. He's basically a glorified quality inspector. His job is to guarantee the weight, guarantee the purity, stop people from making fakes, and cover the cost of running the mint. Any profit he makes beyond that is unjust.
And, this is crucial, if for some reason the standard has to be changed, it can only be done with the full knowledge and consent of the community that the money serves. But Oresme didn't just argue that debasement was immoral. He also showed, with cold, hard logic, that it was destined to fail. He basically laid out a natural law of economics that 2 centuries later would get named after someone else, Sir Thomas Gresham.
So let's play this out. What really happens when a government forces its people to accept money that it knows is inferior? Oresme saw the results firsthand, and the outcome is totally predictable and, well, it's a disaster.
The whole thing unfolds in this predictable, step-by-step process. First, the prince pushes his new, lighter coins into the system. But here's the thing. People aren't stupid. They can feel the difference in weight, they hear the rumors, and they figure out very quickly that the old, pure coins are worth more. So what do? They start hoarding the good money. They hide it, they melt it down, or they send it out of the country to trade with foreigners who recognize its true value. Before you know it, all the good money just vanishes from circulation, leaving only the bad money behind. And that absolutely destroys trade and bleeds the kingdom dry of its real wealth. And this brings us to that core principle: bad money drives out good. Whenever a government forces people to treat 2 types of money as equal, people will always get rid of the inferior one and hold on to the superior one. It's just a fundamental law of human behavior. The prince, in his greedy attempt to get rich quick, actually ends up destroying the quality and the supply of the very money he depends on.
Oresme's diagnosis of the problem, his moral argument, and his economic analysis were absolutely groundbreaking. But what's their real legacy? What do these ideas from 700 years ago really mean for us today?
So let's just recap the powerful principles Oresme left us with. First, that money is a public utility. It belongs to the people who use it. Second, that its value is built on a foundation of trust and a consistent, reliable standard. Third, that a ruler is just a guardian of the currency, not its owner. Fourth, that to abuse this trust for personal profit is an act of tyranny. And finally, that inescapable law of economics: bad money will always drive out good.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Oresme was writing about gold and silver coins. We live in an age of fiat money, currency that's only backed by a government's promise, and now cryptocurrencies, which are just created out of code. His core argument was that money belongs to the community and its value is based entirely on trust. So, in our modern world, where money can literally be created with a keystroke, is that foundation of trust still intact? That is the 700-year-old question that Nicole Oresme leaves for us to answer.